All right, we've got a pitch clock on us, so I want to make sure that we get this done right. How much more time do I have left? Oh my God, it's running out. They're going to call a strike on us. It's Locked On MLB.
You are Locked On MLB. Your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans, and welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all the Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. Look, there's my lower third. You can call me Sully. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Today's episode, which is being dropped on the 8th day of March 2023, we are going to be talking a little bit about the pitch clock, why I like it, the WBC, how can I like it more, and the new cores, the best teammates, lineups, groups. What teams are going to have the new cores? Much like the Yankees had in the 90s and the 2000s, much like the Giants had in the 2010s. This is much too big a podcast to do by myself. So right over there, who do we got?
It's me, Millard Thomas, host of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. You can follow my personal Twitter account at CreatorThomas24. You can also follow the show account, Locked On Diamondbacks, both Twitter and Instagram. Just type it in the little search bar. And please hit subscribe as we're closing in on 400 subscribers on the Locked On Diamondbacks YouTube channel.
And you can follow the show here at Locked On MLB Pod. Same handle for Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. I think I'm still on Mastodon. I don't remember. Just type in Sully Baseball. You'll find me. And we are closing in on 1 billion subscribers on YouTube. We're several hundred million off there. Just like I felt like I was a little off there. And Millard.
Yes.
You're the young one. I'm the handsome one. What now? We're going to try to keep the pace of play of this podcast down a little bit. We're not going to have one of our long marathons. So we're on the clock. We talked a little bit in one of the previous episodes about the pitch clock, but now that we've seen it implemented, we've seen some of some of the ups and downs and it being how it's being done in play, and we're seeing some people go, why was that a strike and everything. We saw Eric Hosmer get called for that, in an at-bat where he was playing games in the batter's box. But we're also seeing the games are going by faster. We're also seeing the pace of play has improved. We're seeing that people are getting in the box. We're seeing that pitchers are, winding up and throwing. And we're seeing the game move along in a nice fashion. Some people don't like it. A lot of people who have been accused, not like it, being accused of being old fogies. I'm an old fogey. I'm over 50, and I've been resistant to some of baseball changes. Ghost runner in second is still a travesty. I still don't want a universal DH. I love the pitch clock. I think it's great. I think it's fantastic. And yes, there are kinks to work out. That's why we have spring training. But tell me your thoughts on it, and now that we've seen it for a couple of weeks in some spring training games.
Oh, I mean, I absolutely love the pitch clock. I love the idea of getting to the action, of course, quicker and more efficiently. Now, maybe we do need to add a few more ticks on the pitch clock because 15 seconds can be kind of quick between pitches if there's nobody on. But what I don't like is the discourse surrounding the pitch clock for anyone that feels like there might be less strategy now in the pre-pitch with the batters, whatever they do in their routine to kind of throw off the motion of the pitchers, or just the fact that some people think that the batters and pitchers don't have enough time between pitches, and some of that might be true, but I feel like the discourse around the pitch clock, it's almost like we're just discounting baseball players as athletes now. I feel like we don't consider baseball players to be high IQ athletes. Like, they can't figure out within 15 seconds what a pitcher should do with the next pitch, what a batter should do, what he should be looking for. Like, I feel like because of this pitch clock, now we're assuming these athletes, these cream of the crop athletes, they're just not smart enough to figure out what to do in between pitch to pitch, and there's not enough time. And I feel like I don't like that discourse. These are the best baseball players in the world. These are the best of the best. And I think they are more than adept at learning on the fly and adjusting to these new rules and settings that they have, because I feel like too many people are just discounting and saying the pitch clock is bad. Let's get rid of it because these guys don't have enough time to strategize. And I'm like, these are the best of the best. You know what? Sometimes quarterbacks, they don't get the play in on time and they have to take a delay of game. That's going to happen sometimes with these batters and pitchers. Sometimes they're just going to have to take a strike because they weren't able to strategize quick enough. And that's okay. We see it in basketball. If you don't get your shot off in time, you take a buzzer beater violation. Maybe they need to add a few more seconds to the pitch clock, but the idea that these guys can't figure out between 15 and 30 seconds, either if you're a pitcher, what pitch to throw next, if you're a batter, what you should keen on next. I don't like that surrounding the discourse because I think we're undervaluing how smart these baseball players actually are.
Also, I know I'm not supposed to say this. Maybe this will simplify the game a little bit. Maybe this will, I mean, look at, I
I've
think
less
there's,
thinking.
I mean, I think there's been a revolution of information and everything. I think that's fantastic. But I mean, the example, I've given this example many times, but I can't think of a better example when overthinking stats can come about, and overthinking the information we have was that game I went to in Anaheim where the Angels had two on, the Angels and the Mariners, two on, nobody out, sixth inning. Jared Kelenic is up. If I mispronounced his name, he was batting like 160 at the time. And they took out the pitcher because I'm sure the stats showed that this pitcher warming up was slightly better than the pitcher on the mound. But it's a 160 hitter. A major league pitcher should be able to get that. That's like what an American League pitcher would be hitting in a interleague game. 2 outs, nobody on. We're going to stop the game because a piece of analysis showed that this pitcher is slightly better than that. How about you say, hey, get the 160 batter out. We get to move on. Instead, pitcher comes out, new pitcher comes in. They warm up. Guess what? Kelenic made the out. So everyone walks back. Everyone walks in. They warm up. And it's like you ground the game to a halt because of a piece of information you had. Or all the times, like, oh, God, this one's coming up. It's in my hat. Let me check what's in the hat. Like, or you have you trust the catcher to give them a game plan. I mean, were players, did they used to be smarter, or are we overloading ourselves with information to the point where, like, hey, what if you just throw a decent pitch and see what happens?
I like this.
Why have we get them where they can ground out to short, see what happens, instead of, oh, wait a minute, now that's here and here. Like, sometimes it is, sometimes it's a game of chess, and sometimes it's a game of Connect Four. I mean, like, it doesn't always have to be this massive example. Well, what do we do here? I don't know. Like, it was I don't know if Stan Musial, one of the great players of all time, was teammates with Curt Flood. I've been reading way too much about Curt Flood and his influence on the game. And he played with Stan Musial. And he said, and Stan was just a brilliant hitter, one of the great offensive players of all time. And Curt Flood asked him, well, what's your strategy when you're at the plate? And he says, when I see a good pitch, I hit the hell out of it. Now,
what strategy?
I mean, yes, there's a mid ground. Having all this information, everything is very helpful to win, but also sometimes throw a pitch, see if you can get him out.
No, I love this take, Sully, because we've talked about it a lot in baseball about how sometimes analytics is kind of too overbearing on the game, right? When you go back to that 2020 World Series, as we were talking before we got on the mic, when you look at the Tampa Bay Rays taking out Blake Snell when he's cruising, like, if you're just rolling through the game and you're just going based off, like, we need to bring back the feel of the game, right? Sometimes it gets too analytics and too black and white based. And I think the pitch clock can bring back the feel of the game where it's like, you know what? I'm just feeling my fastball today. I don't even care if this is a fastball count. I'm just going to let it fly because that's the best pitch that I'm feeling today.
Or do your thinking quicker.
Yeah.
You're a big hockey guy. You're a very big hockey guy. How often when they're going up and down the ice, you say, wait a second, hold on. Did everyone slow it down a second? Now, granted, it's a different sport, but you still have strategy and everything like that to deal with on those things. We're talking about the pace of play. The pace of play, and I can't, stress this enough. Pace of play and length of game are not the same thing. They're not synonymous. It's the amount of action that's taking place on the game. When the catcher comes running up to say, now remember him, you do this, you do this, you do this for every damn batter. How about giving the pitcher a little bit of credit, saying my stuff can get him out? I am not anti-analytics. I just fervently believe that every single analytical addition to the game in the last generation or so has slowed the game down. What analytical trend has added to the pace of the game? If I'm wrong, send me a tweet at Sully Baseball. Working the counts, focusing only on the 3 true outcomes, not caring about strikeouts, focusing on the home runs or the walks, taking away the running game, going station to station, making sure that you're running the pitch count up, lots of pitching changes throughout the game. I mean, every one of those things, while analytically accurate, slows the game down.
Mm-hmm. And listen, these guys still have scouting reports. The pitchers and batters both have scouting reports. So when a pitcher's on the mound and he sees Jose Abreu coming up to the batter's box or whatever, he's like, all right, I have to keep it away from the middle of the strike zone. I have to keep it low because that's his hot zone. And also you're going to know, I'm a pitcher. If I get him my 1-2 count, I know what my put away pitch is. I already know what my go-to pitch is going to be when I have 2 strikes on the call. So I'm going to look at the tendencies of a batter. And I'm going to know what my go-to pitch is. And I'm still going to execute my game plan. Same thing with the batters. They're going to go up to the batter's box and they're going to say, okay, when it's a 2-0 count, I know this guy likes to throw a fastball in that situation. I'm just going to be waiting on it. You're still going to have scouting reports where these guys have pre-information going up to the batter's box when they're on the mound getting ready to pitch the ball. And so it's like, yeah, maybe pitch between each pitch. You have to speed up your process a little bit quicker of what you're going to know. But these guys have general game plans going into each at bat of what they want to do. So it's not like they're just going up there with no thinking out the blue of, oh, I don't know what I'm gonna pitch or what I'm gonna hit today.
And have the best and use the best information you have. But guess what, folks? Get in there. Do your homework between innings. There's a universal DH. So you have time to go through it. That's why you have a pitching coach. Sit down. When this guy comes up, you do this. If he's someone on base, you do that.
Yeah. Have you been to a game for spring training yet?
Ever?
No, yeah, ever. Have you been to a game this year with the pitch clock yet?
No, I have not. No, I've not flown to Arizona nor Florida yet.
Okay. That's I mean, you should come visit, your boy out here in Arizona.
I'll visit my boy out there, but
yeah. But I was just gonna say I went to a game last Saturday. You don't even realize the pitch clock. Like somehow my spring training game still lasted 3 hours, but it's not even something that you're aware of. I don't think there was any violations. And like pitch to pitch, you're not thinking, oh my God, he got that pitch in within 15 seconds. That was so fast. Like you're just casually talking, and then the action is just going. And it's not even something that you're thinking about when you're sitting at a baseball game.
Yeah, but you know what? It's just a surefire bet that people will be enjoying watching some of these games move along a little faster. And by the way, if you're going to be making any bets, where should you be going?
FanDuel.
FanDuel, covering up the names. It's the midway point of the NBA season. Now's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. And download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. A lot easier than this copy. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to threes drained. Plus, FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets. You go to FanDuel.com/locked-on. That's FanDuel.com/locked-on. Go there to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an efficient sports betting partner of the NBA.
Boom.
Never did a read smoother than that one. Hey, let's okay, enough of pitch clock. Let's talk a little bit. So you brought something up earlier. You want to talk a little bit about the Coors, not Coors Field. Not Coors is not a sponsor yet. But we're talking about when the Yankees had their beloved core four, which was basically Posada, Jeter, Pettit, and Rivera, which, by the way, I thought was really disrespectful to Bernie Williams for being
Oh,
left out of the core, because I felt in many ways, at least early on in the Yankees championship run, Bernie Williams was the MVP of that team. But I digress. That combination played on all those World Series winners, although Posada wasn't on the 96 roster. So I kind of, but fine. He did a nice job. But that was a core they had over a bunch of years, won several championships with them. At the beginning of the 2010s, you saw a tremendous core in San Francisco with Bumgarner and Lincecum and Posey and Sandoval and Matt Cain, and you had a bullpen that stayed together a tremendous amount of time. We had a bullpen with the likes of Romo and Santiago and Affeldt and Javier Lopez were all together there. Brian Wilson 1 year doing this, Marco Scutaro doing that. So you're taking a look at who are the teams right now that are building together a core, and you had kind of like a ranking of some of those.
yep.
And I'd love to hear your thoughts on those.
Love power ranking stuff at the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. And we only did lineups too. So we looked at core four for your lineups
Right.
because I believe to have like a real playoff lineup, you need 4 dudes in there who you trust. Of course, some lineups are deeper. You might have 6, 7 dudes, but I think you need at least 4 guys you can trust to go up there and produce at the plate. So I always think these power rankings are more fun when you start at the top and work your way backwards, do a little reverse pyramid. So, Sully, I'm gonna throw out my power ranking to you, and then you could just kind of give me your thoughts on
Can I
whether.
tell you what? Can I tell you what my top one would be? I
Okay,
wonder if it's the same as yours.
okay, we could go back and forth here. Let's
Well,
see
no,
it.
I mean, because I think you've done more homework on this than me,
Okay,
so I'll just tell you my top one.
let's see
I
if
have
we agree.
ideas for some of the, but to me, there is a clear top one, especially with their off season they had last year,
Mm,
and that's the defending champs. I would have the
cool.
Astros at the top for me, adding Abreu to the young star of Jeremy Pena, uh, World Series and playoff hero Jordan Alvarez. Alex Bregman turns things around. Abreu was there with Altuve. If Brantley is at all healthy, I mean, I just think that this, the Kyle Tucker. I mean, Tucker would be a star on many teams, the star of many teams. And you take a look at this team, the lineup that they have. There's no rest for the weary, especially if you have a motivated Jose Abreu in the middle of this lineup. And I think it's important if you're trying to defend the title to add that kind of new piece to the puzzle to sort of give it give it a fun spark. I really think that the defending World Series champion Astros have the best lineup, the best core. And we're not even talking about the pitching staff, but they're developing, I think, one of the strongest rotations. And the fact that they've already have back-to-back pennants, a World Series title, and inevitably will win another pennant in the next few years, if not this year. I think they're the strongest core we have in all of baseball.
I don't hate that at all. The Astros are on my list, but they're not my number one. And
Ooh, okay.
it's only because we had to limit it to 4 people. If it was the core 6, then I think the Astros are number one because they by far have the deepest lineup, and they were the toughest team to just limit it to 4 people. I was like, that
Right.
4th person could be like 3 different options.
Well,
So
that's why I think that's why I put them at the top. But okay,
that's fair. But if I'm just taking the top 4 from each team, then I
fair enough.
think they're a little bit lower on my list. But if I had to go 5 or 6, then the Astros are clearly the best lineup.
Fair enough.
So I don't hate it at all that you have them number one. But to me, I thought the clear number one core in all of baseball for the core 4 was the team in my division that just built it this season, the last couple of seasons.
The Rockies.
Yeah, the Colorado Rockies with Chris Bryant, and unfortunately they lost Brendan Rodgers for potentially the season, but I digress. It's actually the San Diego Padres, just because you're going to have Manny Machado. Excuse me, he was top 5 in MVP voting last year. Tatis, who I think has already won the MVP in 2021 or 2022. Soto is going to win the MVP probably in one of these next few years. And then Bogarts, he's just your casual. He's going to be a 12-time All-Star when he retires in the Hall of Famer. So I just think that's the best core. Of course, the Astros core is a beast too, and we'll talk about them a little bit later. But I think just on paper, in terms of the peak ceiling of talent of your top 4 players, I think Padres are number one.
I totally get that. I absolutely totally get that. And maybe I'm adding a little narrative to this, the fact that this core in Houston is also have the swagger of the defending
Yeah.
champs. I mean, think of the two teams that we mentioned, the Yankees of the 90s and 2000s and the San Francisco Giants of the 2010s. One of the things that made those cores so strong were the multiple titles that this group won. I'm not, even if we say, okay, we're going to Men in Black the 2017 championship and the 2019 pennant out of it. We're only focusing on the Dusty Baker years. They're already putting down the foundation for a dynasty of this decade. And so the fact that everyone I mentioned there, with the exception of Jose Abreu, has been a World Series hero so far. That was the only thing for pure star power. Yeah, I think that this is one of the best collection of stars since we saw LeBron show up in Miami.
Okay, look, a little basketball reference.
That's all right. I'm not that dumb, but so that's the only reason I put the Astros a little bit ahead of San Diego. San Diego to me is a strong two, and I think you can certainly make the case it's a one. I think I can make the case that Houston's a one, but I think that those are the two that are up there. I wonder if I have a number three. I wonder if it's the same number three as you.
Well, I don't think I've told you my number 2 yet, but it is the
Oh,
Houston
okay, yeah. I'm sorry.
it is the
I just
Houston
I
Astros.
just assumed it was the Astros.
Yeah, it's just tough to figure out who you want to put in that fourth spot because I have Jose Abreu written down as the fourth best player, but you could put Alex Bregman, you could put the rookie phenom Jeremy Pena. Like they're so deep at that number 4 spot. They have the deepest lineup in baseball. It's very tough to figure out a core four for them because they're so deep. But who's your number 3 team, Sully?
Well, see, my number 3 team is completely dependent on one of their top prospects. So I'm kind of cheating a little bit.
Okay.
But any team that has number 1 and 2 in the MVP vote with Goldschmidt and Arenado, and then you still have, Edmonds is a fine player. They brought in Wilson Contreras. You got good players if Jordan Walker can turn into the player that we think he can be, then those first 2 of the core are so good that you can fill in. Is it going to be Lars Nootbaar? It better be. They better have a candy bar named after him right away. Or Tyler O'Neill or Brendan Donovan. Or so these wonderful players they have on St. Lou. I just have a hard time ignoring which one of those 2 players should win the MVP. That to me is the foundation of that. And so I'm cheating a little bit there. And I put them slightly ahead of the team that probably should be number 3. But I just did that because I when you have 2 MVP candidates, you can lower the bar for the other 2 members of the core. Maybe I'm cheating there. I used too many for the Astros and too few for the Cardinals.
Yeah, the Cardinals, I had them down as an honorable mention. I wrote them down, but my problem is, listen, like you said, Arenado and Goldie, 1 and 2 in your MVP voting is elite for a core 4. But it's that 3-4 spot where I'm like, the talent there in that 3-4 spot, it's just not as much as these other teams in their 3-4 spot.
Fair enough.
That's why I just got them down as my honorable mention because my number 3 team, Sully, is actually the team that was in the World Series and lost to the Houston Astros.
Okay.
And this one you could guess could be considered cheating too because Bryce Harper is going to potentially miss half the season with like Tommy John surgery, right? But if he's healthy, he's in the core with the newly signed Trey Turner, who's also an MVP candidate. You got the home run leader, Kyle Schwarber, and then maybe the best offensive catcher in baseball in JT Realmuto. I just love the versatility when you have those 4 guys. Bryce Harper could carry your team. Trey Turner's a speed monster. He's added power. Kyle Schwarber is just a straight up power monster. Then Jay Realmuto is just doing work behind the plate. I like those 4 as my 3rd best lineup in all of baseball. Do you have a 4th, Sully?
Well, by the way, I think that I honestly think that Harper missing the first half of the season is going to have a positive effect in a way. Not that you ever want to remove someone like Bryce Harper from your lineup, but I have a feeling that he's going to come back at full strength in the second half and be a boost to the team. And it's like, it will be like making a trade. So if they can stay within contention, for the first half of the season, and then insert a Bryce Harper into the lineup, I think the Phillies are going to do fine this year. Um, I like Toronto
Hmm.
because I think a lot of players in Toronto had years last year that didn't quite match what we thought the back of their baseball card was going to be. But you still have Vladdy Guerrero, you still have Matt Chapman, you still have, you know, George Springer. Who's the last one going to be? Is it going to be Dalton Varsho?
Hell yeah, it's gonna be Varsho.
I mean, and Alejandro Kirk is a good player on there. Could be Bo Bichette. I mean, you have a ton of players there with potential MVP talent, and they were only okay last year, and yet they still made the playoffs. They still hosted the wild card series despite being only okay. To the point where they had to fire the manager and they didn't really have that MVP that they thought they were going to have. If some of those players play closer to what we're expecting, then I think that's a phenomenal core.
You know what, Sully? I have them as my number 4 team as well. Maybe we'll be lock and step these last 2 spots because I still would have loved if they had Teoscar Hernandez in that lineup. I think he would
Yeah.
have rounded out my top 4. I probably would have bumped Dalton Varsho for Teoscar Hernandez. But let's not undervalue Dalton Varsho, what he can do for the Blue Jays, because he's not only going to bring 25 home run potential and 25 stolen base potential. By the metrics, Dalton Varsho was like by far and away the best defensive outfielder in all of baseball last season. So to add that to that mix with Kevin Kiermaier, the Blue Jays outfield defensively is going to be stout. Vlad Guerrero Jr., I think, is going to have a huge season this year. Bo Bichette is going to have a huge season as well. And then I also had George Springer. If he can stay healthy, he was an all-star last season. Wasn't exactly the peak George Springer that we've seen in the past, but he's still someone that's not old at all, still in his early 30s. So I still think he's in his prime as well. So I'm going to have the Blue Jays as my number 4 core. I think they're going to make real noise in the American League. I think in the AL East too, it's going to be between them and the Yankees fighting for that division. And
Mhm.
listen, they added Chris Bassett to that rotation as well this year. So the Blue Jays are in it to win it this season. But do you have a number 5 team, Sully, before I give you mine?
Well, it's funny that like you brought up the Yankees, who have
Mhm.
the MVP, in Judge,
Yeah.
and they have players like, you had a down year from DJ LeMahieu, who a few years ago was a legitimate All Star, and you had a strange season from Giancarlo Stanton. If Stanton and Judge are playing up to their caliber, then that's the second best 1-2 punch in baseball behind uh, Goldschmidt and Arenado.
Otani
Um,
Trout?
but okay, we came in. But
Yeah.
Otani Trout, we're talking not a drop. We're talking like a cliff
Yeah.
you
To
fall
the
off,
3-4.
a waterfall, the beginning of the mission. Hey, anyone who got that reference? But I know that one was obscure for even me.
Yeah.
Um, I'll explain it later. Hashtag Sully Mission if any of you got that reference. But the uh, uh, the Yankees can't rely on any of their other players other than Judge to be of an all-star caliber. Rizzo could, LeMahieu could, Stanton could, even Donaldson could. One of the young kids, that I forget all the names of the young kids at shortstop.
Well, I was
He's a
gonna say,
little
yeah. How about Glaber Torres, the man
Gleyber
who
Torres
you would
could,
have thought he would have been the core 4 guy if
you
this was
know,
like a 2 year ago
and
exercise.
and so it's funny. Like there's all those players that I just rattled off could have really terrific seasons along with Judge. I just don't think anyone can count on that, which I think is one of the strange paradoxes with this Yankee team, whose pitching staff I actually like
Love,
a lot,
I love it.
and I don't trust their lineup. Their lineup could score 8 runs, or we all saw they could get shut out. And so it's strange that you have a team with all the resources and that centerpiece. There you go. By the way, the Red Sox should have a core of Betts, Bogarts, Devers, and
And Nintendo,
Benintendi. There's your core right there. But dare I
sadly,
dream that's not going to happen.
maybe
Um,
JD at least.
maybe
That should be
yeah,
good.
Tank GD and Los Angeles. I mean, they have Betts, they have Freddie Freeman.
Hmm.
They have, I'm still confused with why Trey Turner is no longer there. They don't have Gavin Lux anymore.
No.
That core really, I mean, they have a bunch of really talented young players who a couple of them could explode into superstardom this year, but, or maybe not. Atlanta has, I think, if whatever version of Ronald Acuna Jr. and Matt Olson you get this year is a great foundation for a core. And I think people are still sleeping on Atlanta. I think they're a wonderful team. The Mets obviously have some tremendous players on their club as well. But yeah, I mean, the Yankees are the team that make me scratch my head the most because they have a player who's just this monster, this Frankenstein monster in the middle of their lineup, and a bunch of people who could really be great. But look me in the eye and say you're positive that they're going to be great, and you can't.
Yeah, and someone like Anthony Rizzo feels like he's like 36 years old, even though he's only 32 years old. Like, this is someone that should still be in the prime of his career. He's coming off a solid season where he had 32 home runs, 800 plus OPS, but you still don't expect all-star level Anthony Rizzo anymore, even though he's still somewhat in the prime of his career. I think Gleyber Torres is probably the swing player in that lineup because he's still someone that's like 27, 28 years old. He still hit 24 home runs last season. Like, he still has the upside to be a monster power guy in the middle of that lineup. And we saw him be like one of the most premier offensive shortstops in all of baseball back in 2019, 2020. And I don't know what has happened to that guy since then. So hopefully he can get back to that form. But you just mentioned a whole bunch of teams. Before I get to my number 5 team, let me give you some honorable mentions here because you mentioned the Dodgers, had Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Will Smith, and then it was kind of tough to figure out that number 4 spot in the Dodgers lineup. Like, would it be Max Muncy, who's coming off a bad season? Would it be JD Martinez, who's coming off a down season? Like, it's kind of tough to figure out who's the 4th best player in the Dodgers lineup. Chris Taylor, maybe, but he didn't have a great season either. Another honorable mention, we didn't mention the New York Mets. I thought they were probably the closest team I had to putting them down as the number 5 team with the Pete Alonsos, Lindors, the Brendan Nimos, and the Starling Martes, a really, really good core for it. But the team that you just mentioned, I think, is my number 5 team when I look at all the core fours in baseball. The Atlanta Braves with Matt Olson, Austin Riley, Acuna, and Michael Harris, because Acuna and Austin Riley are good enough to do what the Cardinals did. We could have 2 guys finish in the top 5 of MVP voting. And then they're my number 5 team because I really believe in their rookies last season. Michael Harris is one of those guys, and I think he could be in for just a monster season this year where he has, 15 to 20 home runs and then 20 to 30 stolen bases and bats 850 OPS with a 290 average and just plays stellar defense in the outfield. And I think he could be the swing piece in that team. And maybe you even get to a place where you're like, is Michael Harris better than Ronald Acuna? I don't know. That might be too blasphemous to say, but I think they're loaded with talent in that lineup. They're loaded in the rotation. I think the Braves are going to be in the mix for the World Series once again. I think they have the 5th best core for right now, and we know they added Sean Murphy, which I'm not as high on that move as other people are, but he's still a very good catcher, and that was a nice addition to that lineup.
I totally agree. I think about the core that could have been with the Braves leaving the White Sox. You could have had a core with Abreu, Tim Anderson, and if Luis Robert and Eloy Jimenez had reached that potential, or Moncada, all those players that we all thought were on the verge of superstardom, and it looked like they were having the top 2 right there. Anderson, Abreu was the big slugger in the middle of it. Anderson was the kind of the leader on the field. And if those 2 other players who both were not bad last year, but they never exploded into the players. And Moncada, we're like, how many years are we waiting for him to turn the corner?
Yeah.
That's one of the things for my many friends who are White Sox fans. And check out Nick Morosky on Locked on White Sox. He's a great show there. And for the White Sox fans that I've been talking to over this year, that's the thing that makes them most frustrated about the fact that they didn't cut the cord with Tony La Russa fast enough, because he clearly wasn't working. And they kind of looked at what happened with the Phillies, who fired their high-profile World Series winning manager early enough to turn the season around. Could this White Sox team that was still in contention going into the final month of the season, if things had been a little different, if those players had turned. And now, Anderson's still there. Andrew Vaughn is still a fine player. Maybe Robert and Jimenez and Moncada can become an interesting core in the South Side. But when you lose that Jenga piece of Jose Abreu, that's just rough to deal with.
Yeah, I think everyone's off the White Sox bandwagon this year.
Oh, I am. I
yeah,
am absolutely. But but the thing, and the other thing that's so frustrating is that that's a winnable division.
yeah,
I mean, yes, Cleveland won 90 something games last year and ran away with it in the final month, but they were only up by one game and going into Labor Day. And it's not like they're a low budget team, and Minnesota finished with a losing record. If the White Sox had their act together, they could be talking about, like, this would be like 4 straight trips to the postseason this year. And maybe this is the year where everything falls into place. Instead, they're going back into rebuilding mode with a new manager and blah, 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 blah. And for White Sox fans, it's agony because they look like they're putting together something really terrific. And they wasted the Dylan Cease season that he had last year, because Dylan Cease had a phenomenal season for the
yeah.
White Sox last year. And that was they were handed an ace season. They were handed a Cy Young contender, and it just didn't work. And I feel badly for White Sox fans because things were really looking up for them in the COVID year and when they won the division in 2021.
Yeah, and it wasn't even all on Tony La Russa. Like, no one thought he was a good
Enough
name
of it
catcher.
was.
A lot of it was. But also, it's hard to win games if your best players just aren't on the field. Tim Anderson is perpetually hurt. Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez were perpetually hurt. Lucas Giolito had, like, a pretty down season by his standards. Like, it was pretty much Dylan Cease, the only guy living up to expectations. Like, Jose Abreu was still a contact machine, but his power, like, fell off considerably last year. So it's like, it was a whole combination of things that led to really poor expectations for the White Sox.
The Braves won the World Series with an outfield they didn't have start going into July. I mean,
Yeah.
you could win. Every team has injuries. Every team has injuries. There's always someone in the World Series sitting on the sideline going, "Oh, if only he was in." I don't know. But do you know what? We're not riddled with injuries to the point where I'm going to say, "Hey, we did a good show today."
Oh, no WBC talk?
Well, do you want let's tease that for our next time, because we'll talk about the WBC. Maybe we'll have some stuff to talk about there.
Yeah.
We both have some definite thoughts on that, and maybe we'll see a little who's gone further in there. And by the way, send me your tweets at Sully Baseball and let me know your thoughts about the WBC, whether you're following it, whether you're really into it, whether it's a curiosity, whether you just can't wait for the regular season. I don't want this to be a WBC bashing podcast, but I also don't want it to be a WBC love fest. I want to know what you're all thinking about it. And send that to me at Sully Baseball, your thoughts, and Millard and I will talk about when we reconvene after this weekend. Hey, by the way, just a warning. For those of you who don't like when I bring up things that have nothing to do with baseball, when we get together on Monday, I am going to be talking a little bit about the Oscars.
Okay.
Pal Sully's obsessed with the Oscars, and there have been some very good movies this year, and a couple that made me scratch my head. I really, really, really hope Ke Huy Quan, a.k.a. the kid who plays Short Round, wins the Oscar, because he was great in Everything Everywhere All at Once.
Yeah.
And there were some very good movies this year. I don't think there's been a classic movie this year, but there have been some good movies. And sometimes that's all you want. But there's always been good podcasts when I'm here with Millard. And by the way, thanks so much for making Locked On MLB, or Locked On Diamondbacks for that matter, your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball. Win your league by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the best fantasy draft strategy. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Millard Thomas, tell people where they can listen to your show.
You can follow me on Twitter at CareerThomas24 for my personal account. Look up Locked On Diamondbacks on Twitter, Instagram for the podcast handle. And you could just listen to Locked On Diamondbacks wherever you stream podcasts. And we're on YouTube, Locked On Diamondbacks on there as well. And Everything Everywhere All at Once better sweep the awards for the Oscars. That's all I'm saying.
I hope. I don't know if it's going to sweep it. I think it's going to win a couple of big ones. I hope Michelle Yeoh wins. No offense to Kate Blanchett, who's great, but she already has 2 Oscars. And I hope K. Kwan wins, although there are some. Brendan Gleeson was great in the Banshees of Inisherin. There were some good performances here, too. I digress. Follow us at Locked On MLB Pods on Twitter and Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram. Breaking down the cores and look at the timer going down. We can't go over time here. This has been Locked On MLB, Locked On Diamondbacks crossover for the 8th day of March, 2023. He's Millard Thomas. I'm your pal Sully. Let's fist pump and win ourselves an Oscar.